Hey guys, Greg Knuckles here, and today we're talking about steroids. How can you know if someone is using steroids? And so my short answer is, if you have to ask the question, you probably can't know. So I honestly think you're wasting your time even asking. You can look at guys like, say, on the Mr. Olympia stage, and you really shouldn't have to ask if they're using steroids or not. But for example, take someone like a professional athlete or a top-level powerlifter, weightlifter, crossfitter. Are they on drugs? Kind of some gray area there. Oh, that person can lift so much weight, drugs help you get strong, therefore that person's probably on steroids. I really don't think that's a good argument at all, simply because you can look back to a time before steroids, and there were still plenty of strong people doing plenty of awesome things. Just some of my favorites. Arthur Saxon bent pressed over 400 pounds. And if you don't know what a bent press is, it's like a one-arm barbell shoulder press with over 400 pounds. Most people are happy to bench press that, and this dude's just tossing it over his head one-handed, which is absurd. Hermann Gerner deadlifted 727 pounds with one hand. And again, that's not with straps, that's just bending over, hook gripping the bar, and ripping it. And that hasn't been equal to this day. And then Paul Anderson, regardless of what you think about the claim that he squatted over 1,000 pounds, he had multiple witnesses on multiple occasions, seeing him squat 800 pounds for 10 reps raw, which there's maybe at most a handful of people today who could do that. I mean, there were exceptional feats of strength that occurred before steroids even existed. The next thing that people say is they'll point to how big someone is, how much muscle they're carrying on their frame, like the people in the Mr. Olympia stage who are just outrageously big. And I think you have every right to assume that they're all. People will point to something like the fat-free mass index. And what that was is it was a scientific attempt to kind of predict how big people could be without drugs. And what this researcher did is he looked at the best bodybuilders before steroids existed and worked based off of the assumption that there were people around before drugs who would have been flagged as steroid users. So you can look at someone like Eugene Sandow, who he was, one would assume that he was on steroids because it doesn't take into account genetic outliers. Well, the other thing you have to deal with is training and nutrition. These were the biggest guys in the 1940s and 50s, but I think it's wrong-headed to assume that people hope that drug testing, and I think even the best testing can't do that well. So you have to look at in-contest versus out-of-contest testing. A lot of organizations that say they're drug-free organizations can really at most say they're drug-tested organizations because they're only testing in-contest. And what that means is if I only compete once a year, I can use everything in the kitchen sink for 10, 11 months out of the year. So the only thing you can say is that person peed clean on this one particular day. It doesn't say anything about what they were doing the rest of the year. So I mean, CrossFit is still like that. Most powerlifting organizations that say they're drug-free are like that. And USA Weightlifting, until you get on the USADA watch list, I'm pretty sure they're like that as well. And that's not bad-mouthing those organizations because drug testing is really expensive, and there's really, for the most part, there's not any money in strength sports, and even then, if there is some, it's for the athletes usually and not the meat promoters. So I can understand it on practical grounds. They're always looking to improve upon their techniques to make them more sensitive so they can catch more people. But as it stands now, it's not that hard to beat a drug test. Really all you have to do is take things that have natural metabolites and that have short enough half-lives and take them in moderate doses. So what I mean by that is take something like DECA, that when you actually pee in a cup or when they take your blood, that you won't be out of those normal ranges. Human growth hormone, IGF-1, insulin, and EPO. And those things all have very substantial effects. Testosterone increases protein synthesis. You can take all of those things, and as long as you don't have your dose too high, you'll never test positive. And case in point for that is Lance Armstrong, most tested athlete in the history of professional sports, not because he ever tested positive, because he got tested over 500 times. Like I said, you can take some stuff and you can get some benefit from it, but since you can't take stuff in really high doses to get the huge benefits that you see from, I still think a true drug-free athlete can compete at the top level. Simply because even though drug testing can't catch everyone who uses, it does keep people from using really high doses. So it does limit the benefits people can get from drugs. You can't control if someone is using drugs. You just simply can't. If you show up at a meet and a guy beats you and he was on drugs and he tests clean, you simply don't. And so the way I see it, it's not worth worrying about. Worry about things you can control. Worry about your training, your diet, how well you're sleeping, recovering. Accept responsibility for your own actions. And if someone else is doing something that's unethical, that's between them and their conscience.